Welcome to the MindAid Therapists podcast, Not Here to Judge. Hi, I'm Mansi.
Hi, I'm Shahbosti. We are practicing psychologists, and through this podcast, we want to have an open conversation about mental health. The format we will be following, it's a mix of some days being formal, while some days laid back, or maybe a little bit of both.
In our first episode today, we are going to talk about one of the most commonly diagnosed mental health disorders, depression, also known as the common cold of mental disorders. We'll start by giving you a brief idea about depression and we'll discuss some commonly asked questions. We'll then dive into some tools and techniques that you can use to overcome depression, along with some preventive measures. And we'll also be discussing some of the new research being conducted in the field.
I'm actually very excited about the research, that we get to discuss here. Now,
Yes.
please note, even if you relate to some of the symptoms, which is very normal, please avoid self-diagnosing. For any diagnosis, please consult your nearest mental health professional and also understand that this podcast is purely for information. It is not a substitute for treatment or for therapy. So, having said that, let's start with understanding what exactly is depression.
So, it's also known as major depressive disorder, and we need to talk about it because approximately 280 people in the world have it today. And by 2030, it is predicted to be the second leading contributor to the global burden of disease. So it can occur as an episode in bipolar affective disorder as well, or it can occur on its own as major depression. Um, so in bipolar disorder, the moods usually they can shift between one extreme to the other. Like one extreme can be feeling very low, and the other extreme can be feeling very high and energetic. But today we are just focusing on unipolar depression. Let's first understand what are the symptoms. So there are four major categories of symptoms that we see in depression. First is vegetative symptoms. That means the person can have anhedonia, that means like the inability to experience pleasure, loss of emotional reactivity. There can be sleep disturbance. A person can wake up 2 hours earlier than usual and then have difficulty falling back asleep. There could be psychomotor retardation or agitation. So a person can be not moving at all or completely restless all the time. There can be loss of appetite, significant weight loss, and loss of libido. The next category is cognitive symptoms. So that relates to your thoughts. So a person suffering from depression can have a lot of self-deprecating thoughts, negative thoughts about themselves, feelings of worthlessness, helplessness, or hopelessness. There can be suicidal ideation as well, but again, not every person who's going through depression will commit suicide, but they can have such thoughts. The next category is behavioral symptoms. So again, they relate to your behavior or your actions. So they can be social withdrawal, a neglect of pleasurable activities, failing to meet their responsibilities in terms of their work or family. And the last category is affective symptoms. So again, affect relates to your emotions. So there could be a lot of distressing emotions like sadness, irritability, guilt, anxiety, or worry. And again, these kind of symptoms are present. They are pervasive, as in they are present almost all the time and throughout different areas of a person's life. So they affect everything in their life. And to be diagnosed, these symptoms need to be present for at least 2 weeks or more. And again, there are three categories when it comes to the severity of depression. So a depressive episode could be categorized into being mild, moderate, or severe. And it can happen to anyone irrespective of their age or gender. So this is about the different symptoms that one can go through in depression.
So, it's very interesting to notice that it's just not one or two symptoms, like how people think that, okay, I'm feeling low, so I might be depressed. So it's not just you feeling low. There are so many changes that are happening, so many symptoms that are happening at the same time, which you need to be aware of. And also another thing which I find interesting is the fact that it cannot be just for a day or for an evening that you're feeling this, but for a continuous period of time of 2 weeks or more. So these things are very important to notice in yourself or even amongst your loved ones when you are thinking about depression, or if someone has depression.
Yes, absolutely. And we will talk more about, how to differentiate between like just feeling sad, sometimes, and actual depression. So it's also important to be able to distinguish between the two so that you can understand, in a better way, like what you're going through or what is happening.
Yeah, so adding to this, I feel the next thing we should really focus on, it's the causes of depression, because a lot of times people get blamed for being depressed or feeling depressed. We have to understand that while we might have a small area which is under our control when it comes to anxiety, depression, anything, any mental health struggle, there are parts of it that are not in our control. So one of these things is your genetics. So even when clients come up and we are, initially speaking, we're taking a case study or case history of that client, we do look into their family line, if anyone has experienced the same symptoms before. And often you can actually find that connection that, say, if I have depression, might be my mother also had it at a younger age, or my father, or my grandmom, somebody. So genetics plays a huge role when it comes to depression. In fact, according to research, a person who has like a first degree relative who suffered major depression, they have an increase, chances, or they have a risk for the condition of at least 1.5 to 3% over the other population. And the thing is, if you have, say, a gene that predisposes you to experience depression, any stress or any life changing event that happens in your life, that can trigger it. Another reason, another cause of depression could be your seasonal changes. So we often call this the winter blues. If you notice that when it's winter, you feel more gloomy. And this is actually known as seasonal depression or seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, like we call it. This is related to less exposure to sunlight. This is something we've also experienced during lockdown, right? Where we are stuck
Yeah.
indoors. So we are not outside, we're not getting to be outside, we're not getting the cues of that sunlight that we used to get before. And what this does is, now our internal clock, which is used to, okay, this is daytime, this is when you're awake, this is nighttime when you're asleep, it regulates our mood, our sleep, our hormones. And when this sunlight, we do not get it, our body clock goes haywire and it changes. And when it changes, we start having difficulty regulating our mood. We cannot regulate our emotions. It becomes very tough, which is why our mental health also went into, like a downhill during all the lockdowns. So this is one of the things. Another is inflammation. Yet another thing which is not in our control. It's our body's natural defense mechanism against infections and injuries. But if it gets out of control, it can, worsen the diseases that we're feeling, or it can also result in depression. There's another area which is under research, a lot of research, in fact, right now. It's the gut brain connection, where we've got trillions of bacteria, microorganisms in our gut. Some are helpful, some are harmful. So when this balance isn't right, it can lead to a lot of health problems. In fact, I have read about people who say they've, been diagnosed with depression for years, and medication didn't help or therapy didn't help. But when they finally got diagnosed with the gut health, it immediately impacted their depression. So there's a lot of research happening there, which also makes us understand and realize that it is not just all in your mind, but you have a lot of other mechanisms in your body that takes over. Now, the part of us that might sort of be in our control is our personality traits. we do have it, genetically also we inherit our personality, right, from our parents, forefathers, etc. But we do have our cognition, the way we think and the way we view the world. So, as in therapy, especially, right, that's what we do practice, where our assumptions about the world, we have some assumptions that help us constructively, and we have some assumptions that do not help us. So, uncovering that and handling that, actually looking at it in an objective manner, and then deciding, okay, what is working for me and what is not. In one of the forms of therapy that Mansi and I both we follow is CBT, which is our cognitive behavioral therapy. And what we do here is that we have a model known as the cognitive model, which is that your thoughts, they impact your feelings, and your feelings impact your behavior. So if you say have a triggering situation in life, you end up having a thought about it, which then impacts the way you're feeling about it, which leads you to behaving a certain way. So the concept is that if we can look at the way our thoughts are or our perception is about a particular situation, we can then help our emotions and then help our behavior. So, example, if we develop our viewpoint early on, and learn to automatically fall back on it when loss, disappointment, or rejection occurs. Example, say we feel like we are undeserving of love. So automatically we start avoiding commitment because, we might also be afraid of judgment, of heartbreak. So we have a low tolerance of that as well. So there's a lot of these connection, and this is what we work on in CPT. So our personality traits, they play a role here. Another thing that can lead to depression, there's significant life changes. I think this is something it's more societally acceptable in the sense that when you have gone through a loss of a loved one or a divorce, childbirth, unemployment, or anything traumatic, then oh, okay, you're going through depression. So people consider it legit, if I can say that. Like it's more acceptable, it's not a taboo. But with other reasons, it often comes along with that taboo that, oh, why do you have depression? Like you have everything going on right in your life. So we have these significant life changes also that makes a huge impact. We have a lot of lack of social support or close relationships, isolation. This also makes an impact. Another thing which has a huge, huge impact on us is our stress level. And right now, in the kind of world we live, especially with the advent of the pandemic world, right? We are stressed out 24/7 and we are exposed to stress 24/7. There's this research on a theory known as the neurogenic hypothesis of depression. So what that theory states that our brain regions, they're deteriorating, and these are deteriorating because of physical and psychological stress. So that is the kind of impact stress can have on us. There was this research also. There was a very interesting research which was published just this October, which examined the volumetric changes in 50 participants in Israel who underwent MRI scans before and after COVID-19 outbreak and lockdown in Israel. The brain volumetric changes in the general population, it was quite a lot, following the COVID-19 outbreak and lockdown. So they could actually see the change in the volume in our brain. So it's not just, a myth. All of this does have an impact with depression.
Absolutely. Like you said, that there are multiple factors working together, and like how we, in psychology, we often use the biopsychosocial model to understand the causal factors of any mental health disorder, because mental health doesn't occur or it's not in isolation. There are so many things impacting it at every point in time. That reminds me of another important aspect that relates to our neurobiology, how different types of neurotransmitters are basically just chemicals in the brain which affect our behavior or affect our moods and generally how we function and how we feel. And what do we do? So certain neurotransmitters have been found to have a key role in depression. So some of them, if their levels are too low, then that can have an impact or that can lead to depressive symptoms. So one of them is acetylcholine. This neurotransmitter plays a role in memory, learning, and recall, all of which are affected in depression. Then another one is serotonin. So usually the go-to treatment for depression is antidepressants, which usually use the SSRIs, the serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which increase your serotonin levels, because serotonin is associated with regulating your sleep, appetite, and mood, and it also inhibits pain. So again, this can elevating the levels of serotonin can help improve symptoms of depression. Another one is norepinephrine. It is a neurotransmitter associated with motivation and reward. Again, like many people who are depressed, they don't feel motivated, so this can have an impact. And the last important one is dopamine. So again, dopamine is mainly associated with movement and goal-directed behavior or motivation, both of which are poorly impacted in depression. So again, looking at your neurobiology can also give you an idea of how it has an impact on how you feel. So it's not just in your head. There are a lot of factors that are playing a role here.
Actually, keeping this in mind, this is why when we, talk about treatment of depression, which we will go into in detail, but we also focus on getting the release of these chemicals, right, in our brain. At least by, say, everyday functioning, we do try to incorporate activities in your day where you will have these sort of these chemicals released, which will help you. So yes, absolutely, we need to focus on this. Now, now that we've covered what depression is and what are the causes, let's just go into the questions, right? We have received a few questions regarding depression, and I feel like this is also important because there's so much of myth and taboo surrounding depression. So let's just dive straight into it. The first question that we have is: isn't being depressed just being sad? This is what we also spoke about right in the beginning, no? That it is not. It's not just being sad. First of all, let's just understand about emotions. While growing up, we've been kind of taught that, okay, these are your good emotions, these are your bad emotions, and good emotions are the only ones you should have. That's your happiness or just gratitude, or where you're blooming. And the bad emotions, be that sadness, anger, guilt, shame, these are really bad and you should always run from it. But that's not true, because all emotions play a role in our life. Everything, all the entire spectrum has a role in our lives. For example, happiness teaches us the colors of life. Sadness, on the other hand, it teaches us to appreciate happiness. Whereas, say, pride teaches us self respect, anger teaches us to stand up for ourselves, guilt teaches us introspection. There's so much. So instead of labeling it as good and bad, or only good vibes only, that concept that we've had for some time, instead of that, it's more feasible to label it as comfortable and uncomfortable emotions. So if you're talking about sadness as an emotion, it's a very normal part of life, and you're bound to feel sadness. As a human being, it is not possible to constantly have your emotions always on, at a height and always feeling happy and peppy and chirpy. It's not possible. So sadness is a very normal thing. That's the first thing we need to understand. The second thing we need to understand is that there's a difference between sadness and depression, is because sadness is more temporary. It can, when you wake up, you might feel sadness, and then throughout the day, you can maybe feel better, happier, chirpier, and then go back to sadness. It's a wave. But depression is not like that. Depression is more pervasive, meaning it kind of overshadows into every area of your life. It's more of a mental health condition compared to sadness, which is an emotion. So sadness can vary throughout the day, but depression, it lasts throughout, and it affects every area of your life. So you're unable to even function at all. And often you don't even know why you can't function compared to sadness. The answer to this is no, it's not the same.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like wearing a blue colored glasses, and then through those glasses, everything just seems blue. So that's how depression feels like. And it's not just, this temporary bouts of or feeling of sadness. That brings me to the next question that is often, asked. Can you be depressed even if you have everything you need? Can't you just get over it? And can you be depressed without knowing why? So many people who are going through depression can be, met with this judgment from others that, even if overtly everything seems fine, how can they be depressed, or what is there in their life that they are depressed about, right? But we need to understand that depression isn't selective. It doesn't happen only to a certain group of people who are going through something, problematic in their life or something immense. It can happen to anyone, like I said before, irrespective of their gender, their age, or their socioeconomic background. Even if someone's life seems perfect to you on the outside, or even if they appear successful, privileged, or surrounded by family or, people they love, you might not know that, they could also be going through this. It's also a lot to do with the stigma that, because people are met with this judgment, they often like put on a mask and pretend that they are not depressed or everything is okay. So it's important to not get judgmental, and understand that many people who suffer from depression cannot place exactly why they feel what they feel, especially when other factors in their life are okay, like their physical health or finances or relationship. Due to the stigma, people may feel the need to justify and find a reason for their depression. But again, it's not necessary to have a specific reason. And this can again keep people from, getting the help they need. So this is a really important thing for us to understand and let go of.
Yeah, Mansi, something you said here I really like, which is depression isn't selective.
Yes, absolutely.
Therapists, psychiatrists, all of us who are mental health professionals, even we can, experience depression. It
Yeah, in
isn't,
spite
even with
of
all the tools.
yeah, in spite of having all this knowledge, even therapists and psychiatrists can go through this. So, that
Exactly.
that
And
itself explains it. Yeah, yeah, I think it's good that you
absolutely.
mentioned that.
Absolutely. So this factor that only certain people are allowed to be depressed. Nobody needs our permission to be depressed, right? Since
Yeah.
when are we the ones who get to decide that okay, only if you are in this category can you be allowed to feel depression. And
Yeah,
another
yeah.
thing is about the mask that you spoke about, right? That they wear this mask of being okay. I have heard a lot of people come up to me and tell me that, okay, so and so has said that I'm just attention seeking, or I'm just being dramatic, or it's just me making things up. My question is this: who is enjoying being depressed?
No one.
Like, who is enjoying any of this? Like, who loves just not being able to get up, or actually make the most of your life? Like, who? I don't know who. So being depressed is extremely hard, and then we go like, oh, you're just faking it. Why would we fake it? Like, what are we getting out of it? More
Yeah.
taboo, more discrimination. Who's enjoying this?
Yeah, in fact, people fake being okay so that they don't have to face, this judgment. I get
Exactly.
asked this question a lot. In fact, one of my clients asked me this: how do I know if this is not just in my head and it's real? Because that person has been told by a number of people that it's just in your head, or you're just making it up, or it's nothing, just exercise or just do this.
Snap out of it.
Snap out
My
of
favorite.
it. Yes. Yes.
Snap out of it.
Yeah. So people, they hear this judgment from other people, and it makes them question themselves that whatever I'm going through, is it real or not? But just because other people can't see it doesn't mean that it's not real. You are feeling it, you are going through it, and even like doing day-to-day things are difficult for you. So like it's definitely not just in your head if this is happening to you.
Absolutely. And it's a good addition. The next question, I think, is a great addition to this. Aren't you too young to be depressed? I have had a lot of below 18-year-olds, right, who've heard this, that you're way too young to be depressed. Like, what stress do you have?
Yeah.
Oh, they have stress. They have a lot more stress than maybe we had during their time.
Absolutely.
So, how again do we get to decide what age are you having depression? Depression can happen to any gender, any age, any sector of people, any region, whatever. The diverse population that depression can impact. Depression is not asking our permission again. So yes, it can affect anyone who's too young, too old, whatever it is, it can impact.
Right. So again, one more question that we get asked a lot is, it are people who are depressed or in general going through some mental health problem, aren't they just seeking attention? So I think I'm just going to answer it because we've said a lot already, that no, absolutely not. Shrabosti, you mentioned earlier that going through depression is so hard. Like, why will someone enjoy it, and why will someone, just do it for attention? Absolutely not. It is a real illness.
Yes.
So finally, we get to the part that you can use the most. That is the tools. What can you do if you think you are going through depression? How can you overcome it, or what are the things that will help? So first thing, and that I cannot stress enough on, is that understand that there's no quick fix. Why this is because sometimes the things or the problems that we see today, like feeling depressed, may have their roots way in the past. Like how our upbringing was, or it can have multiple triggers as well. And like we've understood from the causes, there could be three different factors playing a role in the cause, right? So that's why, because it's so multifaceted, we have to understand that we cannot just take a magic pill and just feel better. I wish there was a magic pill, but there isn't. And
we
it's
would
going
buy
to,
so much of that.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to go through this, but there are definitely some things you can do to speed up that process of recovery, and it is definitely possible. It is very treatable. First thing, you can start by monitoring your mood twice a day on a scale of 0 to 10. So 10 being the best and 0 being the worst. Why do this? Because anything that you want to improve in yourself, and especially when it comes to mental health, first thing you need is awareness. Tuning into your own emotions, like what is triggering them, what is making me feel a certain way, what is making me feel better, at what time of the day I feel a certain way. So again, getting that awareness is how you can like start understanding yourself better. So start by doing just that first. Next thing is not labeling yourself as I am depressed, but just saying that I am feeling depressed right now. Because again, when you label yourself as that, you can begin to identify with the depression, and you can basically start to lose your own identity. You might start to feel like I am this person, but you are definitely not. It's just something that is happening to you right now, something that you're going through, and you are not your depression, right? It doesn't define you. Coming to the
Actually,
next
adding
point,
to this, if I can just butt in a bit,
yeah,
adding to this is that self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So
yeah,
where even if you're feeling better, when you keep saying I am depressed, you kind of have to fill in that role as well. So I am anxious or I am depressed. So it becomes a part of you. This is where that detachment we talk about, right? Where we are not labeling ourselves as what we are experiencing, but instead using the word feel so that it kind of detaches you from that experience.
Yeah, that's a very important point. It kind of helps you to not completely become hopeless about the situation, and it might also help you to kind of understand that it's temporary, it's not permanent, right? So yeah, thanks for adding that. Another simple thing that you can do is get adequate sunlight exposure. So I think in our one of our earlier questions, we did talk about sunlight, and how I think in the causes we talked about it. So how seasonal affective disorder is caused by like lack of sunlight, and that happened also during the pandemic. So definitely getting at least 10 to 15 minutes of sunlight in the morning, or even throughout the day, whenever it's possible for you, and not just sitting near a window, but actually going outside. If you have a balcony, you can just sit there and have your tea there in the morning. Even if there is a lot of cloud cover, you can still get more light outside than inside, and that can impact your different neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, and cortisol as well. So that can help you to elevate your mood. Another one, and I think once you start having that sunlight exposure, you will start to notice a difference in your, or like improvement in your sleep routine as well. Because again, that sunlight also relates to your circadian rhythm, like your sleep wake cycle. So you might have also noticed that in most mental health conditions, sleep is the thing that gets disturbed. So getting a regular sleep routine, having like a consistent bedtime and consistent waking up time can also help you to become less vulnerable to low moods. Because if you don't have proper sleep, like in terms of quality and quantity, again you might notice that you are more cranky or you're more irritable. So that is something that you can do. Another one is reduce your indulgence or exposure to social media, and especially avoid using it during 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. at night, as this will reduce your dopamine neurons in your brain, which might again reduce your motivation, right? One more thing I can suggest is, so how in depression it happens that the person might start noticing more and more of their flaws and focus more on them. So in their head, whatever is their faults or their flaws are, they get just 100 times bigger, and they become more self-critical. And then this again makes them feel like even more low. So you can just start by simply writing down good things about yourself, or stuff that you were able to do in a day. So even if it's as simple as, or as small as, taking a shower in the morning, or making yourself a good meal, anything that you were able to get done. So that can serve as a concrete evidence to you that, in spite of struggling with this, I am still doing things, or there are still good things about me. And that can help you to feel a little better about yourself. And doing this consistently can help you overcome depression eventually. The
And this is
last,
actually something we do use in CBT, right? Like before a
yes,
session, once a session starts, we do ask about one positive thing in the week that happened, or any moment where you were feeling better. Now, the reason for doing that is because a lot of times when we are experiencing depression, we are unable to notice those good moments. So, like a
yes,
quick reminder of, okay, this did actually happen, or my feelings did change. Because it's very important to note when our feelings are changing or our emotions are changing, so that we know it's even possible for these emotions to change, and to even
yeah.
see that. So yes, absolutely, I this point is something really good.
Yeah, I think what you rightly said is, we don't actually notice, even if there are, like, let's say I was able to do 9 out of the 10 things that I decided, but in my head I'll just magnify that one thing that I was not able to do,
Yeah.
and then feel bad. So again, like, this is really important, and that reminds me of an activity that we often use in our sessions, is the positive qualities record. And we do this with people who are struggling with depression. We ask them every day to note down a few good things about themselves, and that eventually acts as a reminder that, no, in spite of all this, I do have something good to offer and I am worthy. That again brings me to the last tool, that is the principle of opposite action, or the technique of opposite action. What does this mean? Is like, we talked about the new neurotransmitters before, and how Shabosky also mentioned that we can impact their levels, or we can increase their levels, right? So this is what we are doing by using this opposite action. So when we get involved in certain kind of activity, like as simple as going for a 5-minute walk, this can in itself boost our serotonin levels, in turn reducing our feelings of depression. It can increase the levels of norepinephrine, which can again improve our sleep. If, let's say, you're feeling very low and you don't feel like getting up from the bed at all, then what would be the opposite of that? The opposite would be just getting up and moving around, right? So use this principle, and that will naturally increase your levels of these neurotransmitters, which will reduce your feelings of depression. So every time you feel like, I like don't feel like doing this, do the exact opposite of that. And with this, like, start small if it's too difficult initially. So yeah, I
This is
think
a
this.
paradox, right? Like,
Yes.
when you're feeling depression, the one statement you will always hear is, "I don't feel like doing this. I don't
Yes.
feel like going there. I don't feel like giving up." So when we are suggesting doing the opposite, I have often heard like, "But I don't feel like doing it. So how am I supposed to do it?" Here we have to understand the connection between our feelings and our behavior, right? Where we have
Yeah.
the way we feel, it affects our behavior. Here we are focusing on our feelings preceding our behavior. But we have to understand that the way it actually works is, if we can have our behavior precede our feelings, then our feelings change. So
Yeah.
if we change the way we are behaving, it will have an impact on our feeling. And there's this research which just got published on November 8th. This was by Iowa State University. So what they did is that when lockdown started, they, of course, when lockdown started, everyone was stuck at home, and even people who were physically very active before, they got stuck, right? So mentally, everyone went downhill, which we all experienced. Now, what they've found is that few people, they learned to adjust their lifestyle according to the lockdown. So they started, physically becoming active at home, but there were still quite a few who were unable to do that. And what they found is that those who continue to spend a higher amount of time sitting in the weeks following the lockdown, they were likely to have higher symptoms of depression. So basically, here we can see the connection between our behavior, which is sitting, had higher levels of depression compared to the people who were active at home. So that being physically active is so crucial when it comes to handling depression or dealing with our, depression. So absolutely, I feel like more and more research is also supporting this opposite
Yeah.
action principle. If you notice, like, we've also learned this, right? Say when you're feeling angry, if you smile, like you force a smile on your face, your emotion changes.
Yeah.
Similarly, this is a technique that you can also use in relationships, right? Where, especially if you feel like, okay, your partner has done something to hurt you, or maybe unintentionally, could be, but they've done something that you don't like, but reminding yourself of the opposite, which is, like, oh, okay, they mean well.
Hmm.
This is for, again, disclaimer, this is for non-abusive or non-toxic relationships. This is for healthy ones, which where we do face our problems and conflicts, right? Which is natural part of our relationships. So there, where you're having an opposite thought or a behavior to what you're feeling, that has an impact on your emotion. So this is something you can use even if it's not just depression.
In fact, more and more research today is showing that exercise or any kind of physical activity can be as effective as antidepressants. And coming back to the opposite action, the main message that we need to understand here is action precedes emotions. So even if you are feeling low and not feeling like engaging in any activity, what we end up doing most of the time is we wait for that motivation to come, right? And we rely on it. But instead of relying on that motivation, we just take that action first and the motivation will follow, right?
I think a
So,
classic example here is, how, say, you don't feel like working out, but then you go to the gym and you feel better. Like, as in, then suddenly you feel like, oh, okay, you know what? My mood changed. So
yeah,
this is where, right, you weren't feeling like it, but you still went ahead, and then
yeah,
you felt better. So
yeah,
here, keeping this in mind, we can also talk about social contact, right? Because when you are feeling depressed, you isolate yourself more. You don't feel like interacting with people. But doing the opposite action here, which is being in contact with at least your close ones, that will help your depression more, because you will feel like, okay, you have some sense of social support. So here, even suppose you have at least one friend that you were getting to talk to, it's very helpful if you formulate two lists with your friends. So what are these lists? We call it the pleasurable activity list and the mastery list. Now, as human beings, we've spoken about the chemicals, right? So it's very important to have some activity that gives you pleasure and brings joy in your day, and also some activity that makes you feel like you've achieved something or you're achieving something. So pleasurable could be, say, for example, listening to the kind of music you like, or watching a movie or something, any those sort of distracting activities. Mastery could be like a skill. So it could be even something like taking a bath. That itself can feel like a task, right?
yeah,
So taking a bath, or maybe having one meal, or say you wanted to watch one course, one video of course. So you were able to do that. So that's how you build your mastery, and keep it very small and achievable, like Mansi was talking about, and take it one day at a time so that you can build on it. Successive approximations, another principle that we use here, where you
yeah.
build on small successes so that eventually it feels like a big one.
Yeah, I think I would like to add something here is, like we had said before, that the very things that help in overcoming depression, they are the most difficult to do.
Yes.
So just an example that I often give to, my clients, when they just say that, oh, it's too difficult. So let's say that, you want to get a 30-minute workout done. And when you think about it, it feels daunting, especially to someone who is depressed. So what we can start is by focusing on just the next step. So what you need to do first is maybe you need to, change into your workout clothes. You need to maybe get your yoga mat out, or you need to maybe put on some music, or you need to find your equipment or something, or you need to put on your shoes. So basically, just once you've put on your workout clothes, then you think about the next step. Okay, no, now I need my shoes, or then you think about the next step. Then it will not seem so difficult or so daunting, and you might not even realize, when you got it done.
Exactly. So one day at a time. If not one day at a time, then 1 hour at a time. If not one
Yes,
hour at a time, then one breath at a time.
yes,
Another point I'd like to talk about, and I feel like this is important for everybody, is having better boundaries, and having these boundaries set for yourself so that you can take care of yourself. So if you feel like there are people who are draining you, or there are situations which are draining you, see, there are moments when you cannot avoid something, right, in life. So you might be in circumstances where you have to constantly face whatever you are going through. But having a boundary doesn't mean you're running from it. Instead, having a boundary means that you decide that you will not allow the situation to have an impact on you. So you are basically getting to decide that, all right, if suppose there's someone who's a very mean person to you, how much are their words meaningful to you? You get to decide that and not giving it that value, even if you can't stop that person from being mean. So having better boundaries is very important in any mental health struggle that we face.
Yes, absolutely.
And last point that I think I would like to add is that screen time, 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. Don't use your screen. I do understand that our life, our schedules have really messed up with lockdowns and everything, but we are constantly harming ourselves. The more we indulge in these activities, it's causing us more pain already when we are in pain.
Yeah.
So somewhere along, this is where our boundaries also come in for ourselves, right? Like, what are we doing to take care of ourselves? So here, at least, if suppose, okay, you're on your phone till say 4 in the morning, maybe cut it down till 3 in the morning, at least initially. Cut it slowly till it's possible for you, but avoid using screens.
Yeah, I
First,
think it has become such a habit that first thing you do before you
wake up.
wake
Yes.
up, after you wake up or before you go to bed, is you scroll through your phone. It seems so automatic and we don't even think about it consciously. So maybe you would want to, if like you're depressed and you're not able to sleep, maybe going to your phone or any kind of screen is maybe not the best idea.
I think it would be the worst idea.
Yeah. So maybe replacing your phone or the screen with something else that is more relaxing, because again, looking at the screen, it's going to send that signal to your brain that it's still daytime, and then it's going to be more alert, and that's not going to help you to fall asleep, right? So keep
Exactly. And you're
balancing.
reactive, right? Like, as soon as you're waking up, the minute you open Insta, you're reacting already.
Yeah.
Mentally. So you are not starting with your like a space where you can ground yourself,
Yeah.
or kind of compose yourself,
Or set an intention for the day or something.
exactly. You're waking up with a reaction, and that sets the mood for your entire day. So these little things actually have a huge impact, which we don't realize. I think we should move on to the next question, right?
Yeah.
Which is basically how to start thinking positively and come out of the loop of negative thoughts when depressed. Now, as human beings, we have around 70,000 thoughts that cross our mind. And
A day.
when you think about it, yeah, a day. Very important point there. So if you think about it objectively, it is not possible for 70,000 thoughts of yours to be true every single day, right? So the first thing we have to also understand is that thoughts are not facts. They're just thoughts. Some thoughts are, quite true, but there are some thoughts that are not accurate. And being able to notice this is very important. Our thoughts, they influence the way we feel, right? So one of the questions that we want you to ask yourself is, whenever you notice a change in your mood, ask yourself, what just went through my mind? Immediately ask yourself this. If you need right now, please jot it down somewhere. What just went through my mind? Because what this will do is, whenever you think of this, you will be taking a step back and actually looking at your thought, of which thought is dominating you right now. Another thing about thinking positively is, you do not need to be positive all the time. This is something we've covered, right, in the beginning of this podcast. Good vibes only doesn't work all the time. We are humans, we have range of emotions. It's just that we don't, where do we draw the line of where we are feeding into our thoughts consistently? That's the line that we need to look at. So it's okay to feel down, it's okay to think negatively here and there. It's just that, which is your dominant thought? Now, once you have figured out, okay, these are the kind of thoughts I'm having, notice your pattern. Notice that this is how I feel. And after that, challenging your thoughts. This is very important. It's a very difficult life skill, which I feel we should teach in schools, where you challenge your thoughts and how to
Yeah.
evaluate it. One of the tricks that we use, right, in CBT is where you addressing your worries, right? So address your worries in a written form so that it's more clear. And once it's out there in the paper, just try this technique, which is known as the worst, best, realistic outcome. So you ask yourself, what is the worst that can happen and how would I cope up with it? Then you ask yourself, what is the best that can happen and how do I cope up with that? And the third is, what is the realistic outcome of the situation and how will I cope up with this? So this is your worst, best, realistic outcome. Now, with the overthinking pattern, when you think of the vicious cycle, right, it's a lot of question marks.
Hmm.
How, when, why, analyzing,
What if?
dissecting, what if, catastrophizing is what we call it, right? Our
Yeah.
favorite, catastrophizing.
Yeah.
So the medicine for overthinking these questions is answering these questions. We are not going to avoid it because the more we avoid, the more we resist, it persists. So you answering these questions, which is why you write it out if possible for you, or maybe record in a voice note, whatever is your mode, write it out, and then you can try this worst, best, realistic outcome. Another thing that I personally love doing with my clients is known as the circle of concern and circle of control. So what you do over here is you take a piece of paper and you draw a circle and you write there concern. So in this circle you're going to basically jot down what all falls in your life which are of concern to you. So they can be, say, family, profession, or academics, or social life, whatever, fitness, whichever are your areas of concern. Next, you draw another circle and you write the control. So here we are going to basically distinguish between what is in our control and what isn't in our control. For example, say if it comes to family. So what is in my control would be taking care of my parents, or taking care of my family members, or trying to be there emotionally for them as a support system. Now, what is not in my control is the way they react to me, the words they choose for me. I cannot control that. I cannot change their anger or their ways of living, right? So that falls under not control for me. Similarly, if you're looking at, say, academic or social. So if I'm looking at academic, then studying falls in my control, but the grades I get, it's not in my control. So having this distinction for your areas of life, this gives you a clear picture of where to put your attention, where can you invest your attention, and where you cannot. The areas where you can put your attention, please do. But the areas where you cannot, what's the point? You can't anyway, right?
That's a great way to look at it, and I'm going to try this technique myself. Because when you worry a lot about things, having that distinction between, okay, this is something that I can do something about and this is something that I cannot do anything about, can really help you to, like, just unburden yourself and just focus on the things that
Absolutely.
you can do something about. So yeah, I really like that technique.
Thank
So
you.
that brings me to the last few things that I want to mention. You mentioned that in the circle of control, we have a lot of things that we cannot control. Like right now, in the ongoing pandemic, there are so many things that we have no control over, and it has caused so much of anxiety and uncertainty. So we cannot still just run away or like turn our attention away from these. They still exist, the things that are not in our control. So what do we do when we still get worried about these things? And it's normal to get worried about these things and get affected by them. So one thing that can help you here is this concept called radical acceptance. It's basically a non-judgmental attitude towards these things that are not in your control but still distress you in some way. So it's basically looking at a situation and saying to yourself that, okay, this is what it is, and I cannot do much about it. So let me just, accept it, or let me just look at it as, just something that is happening right now, and not just saying that, I like this or I don't like this, or not even approving the situation, but just looking at what it is and not fighting with the reality that, oftentimes when we go through such scenarios, even in the pandemic, many of us might start asking questions like, why is this happening to me? Why can't XYZ, do this more? Or why can't they be this way? So again, this causes a lot of distress. Instead, what we do is simply, like I often give this example that if you're, stuck in the traffic, many of us like obviously get irritated by like the traffic, and we start questioning like why it is like this, or I'm going to get late. And but no matter how much you fret about it, it's going to have no effect on the traffic. So instead, what you do is you tell yourself, okay, right now I'm stuck in traffic, cannot do anything about it, it is what it is. Maybe you just, put on some music in your car and just enjoy it while you can. So basically it helps you to shift your attention away from these things that distress you, and you can focus it on something else. So this is something that you can try.
And actually, adding to this, I like how you said that it's not approval, right? So
Yeah.
this is something we need to be very clear on, that acceptance is not equal to approval of a situation.
Yes.
Just because I'm accepting something doesn't mean I'm agreeing to
Or
it,
I like it.
or I like it. The only reason I'm accepting it is so that now I can have a game plan about it. Like, okay, how do I actually tackle this? So, especially, when things are falling apart in your life, say your relationship has failed or your career has failed, and, you're going through a lot of loss. When we are in denial or we're fighting it, it creates more resistance, right, amongst us. It creates more pain amongst us. Instead, if we are able to go like, okay, you know what, this is the situation, cool, this
That's
is
it.
how it is,
Yeah.
let me acknowledge it. It frees you, and it gives you that same energy that you were investing in resisting. That energy now you can invest in figuring out a way out of this, or a
Yeah.
solution to this, or a way to make help yourself feel better.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's why radical acceptance is extremely important. And this is where we also have this new therapy form, right, where we have acceptance and commitment
Yeah.
therapy, ACT,
Yeah.
which is based on this. So it is actually being used in clinical practice now. It's not just just a thing that we're talking about, but it has an impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And that also connects me to the next concept, that is mindfulness, which is again somewhere related to radical acceptance. Like radical acceptance is just one of the concepts of mindfulness. And mindfulness based therapy has been, shown to be one of the most effective treatments for depression and anxiety. So what is exactly mindfulness? Is basically the ability to stay in the present moment. Because you might have noticed, like when we have depression or even anxiety, our mind is never in present. It's either thinking about something in the past and ruminating over it, or it's thinking about something that might happen in the future and worrying about it. And then that kind of impacts our present moment, is that we lose focus on what actually matters. What actually matters is what you're doing right now. So in mindfulness, what we do is we basically try to connect to the present moment by either using one of the five senses. So the technique that we call grounding technique, right? So you either use your vision by, noticing a few things around you, or you try to listen to the sounds that you can hear in that moment, or you feel your feet against the ground and then like just notice how it feels. Or you can use your breath as an anchor that connects you, or that binds you to the present moment, and just notice how the breath is coming and going. By practicing this more and more, what happens is you become attuned to what is happening right now, and that shifts your focus away from all these ruminations, all these scary thoughts. Because anyway, like Shrabosky also mentioned earlier, that we are going to have these thoughts. But the only thing we can do here in mindfulness is just sit back and watch the thoughts as if you are watching a movie, but not get affected by them, or not just feel the need to follow every thought that you have, because like we talked about it earlier, thoughts are not facts. Practicing this a little bit every day can help you to reduce your level of depression. Neuroscientists have also shown that practicing mindfulness affects brain areas related to perception, body awareness, even your pain tolerance, your emotional regulation, introspection, your complex thinking, and sense of self. More and more techniques from mindfulness are now being used to treat depression and anxiety. So it's definitely something that you could use.
There are so many apps now, right? Like, we are a generation that is lucky enough to have apps available for free too. So do look it up.
Yeah, there is a
Anything that
lot
can
of
help you.
free content available on YouTube or even on Spotify that you can just
Yeah,
listen to and practice. So you don't really have to even pay for it.
absolutely. So
Yeah.
Manse, let's wrap up our podcast
Yes.
and maybe give some pointers on some preventive measures when it comes to depression.
Yeah. So we are talking about preventive measures here because depression can be prevented even if you are genetically predisposed. There are so many things you can do to, keep your mental health in check, and that you can do by making it a priority. So first and foremost, like we talked about earlier, exercise of any kind, whatever that you enjoy. It doesn't have to be like, you don't need to go to the gym or go running. Not everyone enjoys that. So anything like something as simple as dancing or Zumba or yoga, anything that you like, indulging in it every day for at least 30 minutes can
And also,
be.
everyone, disclaimer, okay, dancing is not simple, and we both are dancers, so don't take it
It's
that way,
not.
okay, everyone. Yeah, we both die dancing, but yes,
Yes,
continue.
it can exhaust you completely. But
Yes,
it's very enjoyable. So yeah, basically find out, try out a few different things, and figure out what works for you, what you enjoy the best, and just start doing it for a little bit every day. Next thing is processing your emotions. So, we often learn growing up. I think we talked about this earlier, that, having certain unpleasant emotions or even expressing them is not approved of socially, right? So we begin to mask them or we begin to suppress them only to find out that they, come back in some or the other form later. So whenever you're going through something, make this a habit or a practice of at least acknowledging. You don't have to all the time express it to others, but at least acknowledge to yourself that, okay, this is what I'm feeling, and labeling it. Naming a feeling can also help you to kind of distance from it and reduce its impact, make it less intense. So acknowledging that, okay, this is what I'm feeling today, and it's okay to feel this way. Again, like acknowledging and validating, and also processing it in whichever way that helps you, like either by talking to someone or writing about it, or just thinking about it. So don't just push your feelings away, but regularly keep in touch with or bring that awareness of your emotions, and also understand like what are your triggers, right? Third one, most important, and that was kind of disturbed during the pandemic, is taking breaks when you need them. In the pandemic, we all of us experienced like a blurring of boundaries between work and family and personal time, right? But again, your productivity is not the measure of your self-worth or your who you are as a person. So taking breaks, even for 5 to 10 seconds, just pausing, stepping away from your screen and just maybe looking outside, or taking a walk, can give you that breather that you need throughout the day. You don't have to every time, wait for your vacation to let go of your stress. You can give yourself that break every day for a few minutes, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to add some things here. One of the things that is important is also being aware of the signs, the symptoms, being aware of your gene, whether it runs in your family or not. So that if you have family members that have experienced depression, so you know that you're susceptible to it. So to take better care of yourself. Another thing is something we learned in the pandemic: having a consistent routine, having a routine you follow in the morning or in the evening or in the night. This also is very important. We've also spoken about the pleasure and the mastery lists, right? The activities. So having that in your day, even if it's just for say 5 minutes, but even if it's just having a cup of tea, your chai, you're sitting and you're just drinking your tea.
that we love
That's
so
also
much.
absolutely. So even incorporating that is very important. So these are few of the preventive measures, but of course there are a lot more that you can do if you feel like you are experiencing or anyone that you love is experiencing depression. Please reach out to a professional who can help you. We'd also like to say that there's no shame in getting help. All of us require it. Every single person. So you're not alone. We are there to help. Please reach out. And so with that, we wrap up our first podcast.
Yeah, we should definitely. I feel like we've been talking forever. I hope it's not too long for people.
Please give us feedback as well so that we know what to work on, and forgive us for any mistakes we've made. It's our first time, so we are a bit nervous. So with that, we will say goodbye. Please follow us. We are there on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify. So we are MindAid Therapists. This is Shrabosti.
And this is Mansi. And if you want to support this podcast, please feel free to share it with your friends and family. And of course, if you have any further questions, don't hesitate. You can DM us on Instagram or you can just drop them in the comments. We are going to be posting this on our YouTube channel as well. So you can leave your questions there and we'll definitely include them in our next podcast. We'll be happy to answer them.
We provide online counseling and therapy. You can find us on www.mindaidtherapists.com. So with that, take care.
Thank you so much for listening and we'll see you in the next episode.